Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of media, marketing, technology, culture, everything in between. We are excited to have a personal friend of mine and one of my favorite bloggers, Mike Solana. Mike has been one of the more interesting writers at the intersection of technology and culture. I'm so excited to have him here. He doesn't really need an introduction. If you follow me or Chris, we share his stories all the time. So we'll get right into it. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Yeah, welcome,
So we'll just start with a fun topic that I've enjoyed you ranting on a little bit on Moment of Zen and also your own podcast on the whole cacophony with social media lately. And unlike everyone else, I don't want to talk about what's going to happen with threads and Twitter. I think that's all playing out sort of as you predicted and as other people have said. But what I want to talk about is sort of something that I think marketers miss, and that's the notion of posters, right? The notion of the people who show up every day to share online because they're like this weird, they're weird iconoclast people. They care irrationally about issues. They're like the opposite of the sort of Kardashian style influencers. They're sort of the people who have the they're like kind of the undercurrent of the internet that no one really talks about or acknowledges. But I think that they're actually one of the more important drivers of culture and of sort of media important issues, wherein we see like marketers classically will go after the people that can sell like makeup and are kind of like the modernization of the grocery store checkout aisle or the morning show just online. But the more interesting brand of internet user is sort of the weird person who probably cares a little bit too much about their industry or cares too much about politics. And by too much, I think maybe just more than everyone else. And in a previous culture, it wouldn't be so weird. So I'm curious, what do you think is broadly misunderstood by these people for marketers listening this to understand if you were maybe describing an alien species to them, right?
Such a good question, because it's like, I think you're butting up against something that's sort of new. And so we lack words for it. I wrote about the Threads Twitter stuff in a piece for Pirate Wires. And we talked about it on the podcast too, called, I think it's like Elon's or Twitter's Final Boss. And my point, I guess my warning for Threads was just like, this is the most serious threat that Twitter has ever faced. It is a serious threat, unlike all of the others, because they're going to scale up really quickly with users. And then it's going to come down to content, like, will they have it or not? And that comes down, the content on Twitter is not, the best content on Twitter is not like a celebrity, or which is what maybe people thought Twitter was going to be 10 years ago, which felt new, by the way, to have celebrities tweeting their thoughts. And it's certainly not a New York Times piece like linked to Twitter. It's people who live on Twitter and produce short form content and also curate. Like that's what these people do. And what they really are is they're like the progeny of the commenter on like the New York Times or something. The people who used to maybe even before them write into the New York Times or call in to talk radio. And now in the age of social media, I don't even know if social media is the right word. It's like, this isn't social media anymore. We're living in an age of like new media, whatever this thing is, where we kind of like, we live online and we produce media and we consume it ourselves. That group of people, the sort of terminally online, we call them, is like the pejorative we use for people who we are. Hipsters did the same thing back like 10 years ago. It was like, everyone fucking hates hipsters, but the people who were saying it were hipsters. That's, when you're talking about someone who's terminally online, like you're usually one of them yourself, because people who are not terminally online don't know what that phrase is or means or what it relates to. It relates to people who just scroll all day and they see news and they curate the news and they share the news with their friends or stories, interesting ideas. And I think it's like, I don't know what marketers need to know about those people other than they're the sort of like living substrate through which stories are told today. All of them are filtered through this group of people. they can't really be controlled. There is not one really important one. It's like a class of people online, and there are no rules and laws. It's just like vibe based. Everything kind of is like it's like sort of trends emerge and people agree on them and discuss them and contribute to them. I don't know how else to describe it really, but they're more than a commenter and less than a publisher. I am now sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say I'm like I've evolved beyond it. I'm still a poster, but I am also a publisher. Like I run Pirate Wires, and I have hired writers, and it's a new media company, so I feel like I still get to kind of claim the poster credit a little bit, but it won't be that way forever. And the posters are the reasons, like anyone, that class of super online people, they've always been the reason that my work has either worked or it hasn't. It's either those people are sharing it or it doesn't really matter. And it's like, I don't know, it's an uncontrollable thing. This is maybe why marketers don't want to focus on them, because it's just so hard to have a strategy there. It's not like I'm going to buy some ad in the New York Times and everybody's going to see it anymore. It's much more amorphous. You sort of have to be one of them to contribute to that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's marketers don't like the fact that they can't just, broadly pay a bunch of them, a few $100s for a TikTok dance, right? And so to maybe influence those people and get them interested in a new SaaS tool or, a new brand of water that's in a can, that might have to happen in a way that's not part of a structured playbook that was taught in schools and they were running for the last decade. I think that that's the difficult thing for marketers is I think those people, the sort of the people that maybe aren't full-time professional bloggers or publishers, but are more tuned in than someone who logs into Facebook once or Instagram like once a month to see what their friends are up to. I think that those people have like stealth influence that's beyond anything else, just because if you saw with the whole crypto influencer thing where they were paying like Matt Damon and various C and D list celebrities to hype things that were obviously part of a bubble, the veneer was peeled back for anyone where it wasn't peeled back yet, that these people will basically do anything for money. And in a connected world, I've had this thesis for a long time that the notion of celebrity is going to go away, and we're going to care about what our friends think and what someone with 20 years of experience in whatever sector, if we're looking for a solution for a certain problem, we care what they think and not necessarily what Tom Brady thinks, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a return to. Not a return to. So I think in every single group of, in every friend group and in every family, there is usually like one person who is the person who knows what's going on outside of that group, right? They're the ones who are like reading the news, and they're super in today's day and age. They're the ones who are super online, and they're the ones who are telling you what's going on. Like I actually have friends all the time who come up to me and they're like, "Oh, what's that story that I read about? Like, what's going on there or whatever?" And I'm sure that you guys have that too, because you're hosts of a show like this. Like, you're probably that person, and you're almost certainly that person in your friend group. And that is the impulse that the average person has when they go online. Is they're reaching for that person. They're looking for that person they can go to be like, "Yo, this is like chaos out here. What is going on?" And that's just those people. That kind of person is becoming, they're no longer serving that role for a family or a small group of friends. They're serving that role for hundreds of thousands or millions of people. That's the trend. It's going to continue to go that way. They're not only, it's like you're no longer just the aggregator of news in your family. It's like there are people who are aggregating news and sort of curating information for the information curators. It's like there's like a hierarchy of that now. And so a lot of super online people are looking to people like Joe Rogan, for example, to source them interesting stories and ideas and things like that. And so that type of person, whatever that is just much more important now. I guess you could say that, in the past that would have been a journalist. Like if you look back to the 18th century in America, that sort of press ecosystem, they were like the super online people of their day. They didn't believe in journalistic integrity as a concept. That was really a concept, I think, that formed in the 20th century of being neutral and unbiased and using certain kinds of language. And it used to be like much more really like what I do today in my writing. It's like here's a fucking take, here's what's going on, here's the lay of the land is, like here are people that I like that you should read, and things like that. And that's what it was. It's just now we live inside of that because we live inside of a world of information on the internet. And so those people are just, much more influential than they ever were before at a scale. Like not only is the scale larger, but like you can achieve these audiences much quicker. It's like you could potentially go from 0 to millions overnight if you're, for whatever reason, like sticky enough. And who even knows what causes that? It's like some weird way that you speak or some way that you write that just happens to be compelling. You don't even know it most of the time, and then suddenly you're enormous.
What do you think the responsibility of someone? I actually have a separate opinion on this than what media say, but a lot of people say because someone like Rogan, and it could be anyone who gets to scale, I guess, has a certain responsibility to report in a different way than they're doing. Is that really their responsibility just because of their success online? Now they have to be different than just, Rogan's just a podcaster, right? If he had 10 people, no one would really care what he's saying. And I think like, because he has that scale, he's become a magnet where there's like under a microscope of anything he says to pull something out from a 3-hour discussion and make it this like, moment in time, weirdly.
I go back and forth on this. I always resisted the idea that he had any kind of responsibility or that people like him but I've noticed increasingly like how much trust people put in me in my writing that it's alarming to me. Like I think to myself, because I don't put that much trust in anybody. I am skeptical of everything, and I think to myself often, like I could tweet almost anything, and people be like, "That's right," and it's like, okay, I don't want to put that responsibility on anybody else, but I can say that I, at a far smaller scale than Rogan, feel a responsibility. And so I think if he doesn't, I imagine he does feel some kind of responsibility. I think that he believes what he says. And I think there are all of these devices in his show that are really interesting, like having his friend look stuff up as they're talking, I think is really important. But it's like, it's more like, it feels not like a fact check so much as like he's showing his audience how to have these conversations. You don't just believe something. Well, look it up. And like, what data are you looking at? And they're bouncing it back and forth. And people have a million problems with this. People who don't like what he has to say have a million problems with this. But it's just like so much healthier than the format before, the 20th century format, which was like guy with megaphone who has connections to the state because they're all monopolies and all the power class knows each other, like tells you what to think. This is way better than that. But I would say, like, if he doesn't feel a sense of responsibility, that would be a huge character flaw, I think. Just knowing what I know now, like, have my small audience, like, I'm like, you do have I believe that I have a responsibility to not mislead anybody and to just take this, like, the information seriously, I guess, is the best way I can say it. I think that responsibility thing is often used as a weapon by people who want Rogan to just sound like them. And that I take huge issue with, and I don't agree with. But I do think Rogan has a responsibility. And I think for the most part, he knows, he seems to me to be living up to that responsibility.
Yeah, it seems like you're like the pamphleteer for the 21st century, Mike. Let's kind of go back to the new world of media. That's something that I'd love to unpack with you, given that we're seeing all these things happen in the world. Like we're seeing large corporations that historically dealt with media having less prominence, less influence. And it's kind of interesting because like I'd say I'm chronically online. I've been working in tech for, I don't know, 15 years. So in the early days of my career, I remember the bloggers were like the original commentators, the people that would provide objective, opinions and kind of go back and forth on facts. But then they eventually became venture capitalists, and now we're seeing kind of a reversion back to the VCs and the investment class investment folks moving towards becoming the objective voice of reason and the voice of truth. What do you think is informing that? Is that, or why do you think that's happening? Is that like the all-in podcast effect? Is that like we're fucking sick and tired of the media and basically PR is kind of on its way out? What do you think is happening?
Well, in VC, you have a long history of this already. Like you have the Paul Grahams of the world and things like we've had sort of the sort of like VC influencer thing has existed. And before the All In podcast, you had so the All In podcast arrived in this moment where people had been quiet for a while. Actually, there was an old ecosystem that went quiet during the sort of at the height of the culture war, I would say. So like the 2018, 19, 2020, especially the BLM situation, when like suddenly rioting was legalized and like you couldn't dissent at all or you fucking eviscerated, like nobody was talking. And in that sort of vacuum is where like, I mean, I was talking about local politics a lot at that time. And even then that felt dangerous to be like, yo, what's up with the fact that crime is legalized? Like I felt like that felt like edgy, and it's just not at all anymore. But the All In podcast guys that was like the first, they were like the return. It was like the return of that after maybe 5 years or so. And obviously huge, they returned. And then I think it's like, they definitely have done something that probably no one else in the industry has done in terms of just like sheer popularity outside of even tech. They have a more general audience even, and certainly everyone in tech listens to them, and that's great. I think to the question of why it is, I think it's always existed, is that it's a very small community. And so like it's just very simple. It's like entrepreneurs are looking to raise money and they want to know what venture capitalists are thinking about. And so a venture capitalist can very easily build up an audience online of people who are interested in entrepreneurship and tech. And that naturally just sort of on a platform that was built, by the tech industry at the beginning of the last bull run, would be like Twitter, for example, in like, was it 2007? I think or 2007 maybe is when it started, but 2009 is at 10 is I think when it really sort of started becoming a huge platform for disseminating information in tech. Like it was just a small market that was easy to dominate, and the natural person who you would look to for information is a venture capitalist. And so they started speaking and building up their own audiences. And so then inevitably what you saw was the first real conflict between this alternative purveyor of information, which was the VC, which is funny because they tend to be like really rich and well-connected, but they were still occupying an alternative role in the media landscape, which was dominated by like, the sort of like the New York Times and places like that. Like suddenly what a random VC, not even a good VC, a lot of the really popular VCs years ago, with the exception of Mark Andreessen, who's both popular and very good, like most of the popular VCs were total losers in the end. Like they were not, like you don't see Peter Thiel tweeting, like that's not and like Vinod, like he wasn't tweeting till recently, really. Like the Sequoia people, like they're not like popular on Twitter. It was like Hunter Walk and shit like that. Right. You suddenly saw all this sort of came to a natural head in the sort of dark years over the last 5 years or whatever, where like those people suddenly were like, we're not going to listen to the press anymore. We're not going to let the press attack our founders anymore. We're going to stand up and represent a new sort of the new media ecosystem, I would say. Balaji was a big part of that, even though he wasn't, I think, a venture capitalist at the time. That was our tech culture war. Was really just a question of like who you were going to trust. Were you going to trust a journalist who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, who has never even met an entrepreneur in their life in some cases, or are you going to trust the people who are actually doing this stuff themselves? entrepreneurs themselves. Many of the entrepreneurs that we see are pseudo influencers themselves, or the venture capitalists who are, you know, committed and obsessed with the ecosystem. And I would say last thought on this is just a lot of those people from the earlier generation were obsessed with attention and approval from the press, and they are no longer popular, right? Like you don't hear about Hunter Walk anymore. And it's like, that's because he, at a moment when I think it really mattered, when I think the entire sort of entrepreneurial class felt really attacked and threatened existentially by the press and the government and things like this, those people were not standing up for them. They were criticizing them. So the people who stood up for them are the new influencers in tech, I would say, which is just also inevitable. Like, of course, the influential class in tech online is going to be the class that is actually on the side of tech.
Yeah, I mean, like, what happens to all the folks that were shredding tech as part of like a centralized media organization? They're now living in their own little echo chamber on Threads. Like, you know, the people like, what happens to like the Casey Newtons and the Taylor Lorenzes of the world, right? I mean, we could probably.
Taylor will be great. Taylor's going to be a star. She's going to go on and on. I have no doubt that Taylor will.
I'm a huge fan. So
I mean, I think I'm technically a fan. Like, if you just break it down to like the amount of, like, I am interested in what she has to say. There's no denying it. I think that she'll be fine. Like, she's gonna go, she has her own audience, and she's very actually savvy about this kind of stuff. She's aware of trends, and
she's like the Tucker of the left. She's like the Tucker of the left.
I don't even know that she's left though, dude. Like, that's the crazy thing about Taylor. Like, I think that and she reminds me more of Trump than Tucker. Like, she's a creature of instinct, and she rides waves, and like, I think that I just know that she also is not beholden. She criticizes her own companies that she works for all the time. Like she is an influencer before she is an employee of the Washington Post or whatever. Though she does, in my opinion, I think she does speak for the Washington Post. And like, if you employ someone like that, it says a lot about your brand and your integrity and things like this, and not necessarily good things, in my opinion. But in terms of her, she'll succeed. Like, she's great.
Yeah, of course.
Very talented at what she does. People like Casey Newton, less so. Like, I think that he is, it's weird. Like, he's also an influencer. He's also obviously gone direct, and he's doing his own thing, which is really commendable. And I think he's done a great job building that up. But he still is playing a game that feels sort of dated. And I don't think long-term he's going to be able to, I think he'll probably be able to eke out a living forever, but I don't think he's going to win. He's never going to be the dominant voice in tech. I'm
a subscriber to Casey, and I always liked him. I do feel like the way he views things does seem, it seems like he has been indoctrinated into a view of the world that is a little anti-tech. It just feels that way when he writes certain things. And I actually really like him.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I don't understand. Like, if you are in tech, why are you reading him? Like, I think it's like we don't need, this is the thing that's new, that we do not need to be learning about the industry from people who hate us. And some of this is inescapable. So the New York Times, for example, where most of the stories of the world are, I think, broken. There are a few sort of big, not just opinion people or aggregators of news, but places where new news is reported. Like, a lot of what I write about, I'm writing about, it's in news that's been sourced by the New York Times. It's like, I'm writing about the New York Times shit, and I'm trying to weigh their biases against what I'm reading and against what I know. And I'm doing my best to get to the truth there. But what I certainly don't need in that relationship is another opinion person who has a few contacts who don't matter at all of these companies, who also hate their companies, who source all of his stories. And it's like, I don't need that voice. It's not relevant to the conversation. And in fact, giving him money just hurts the industry. So it's like, I really would encourage people to not be subscribing to places where the person actively wants to destroy a lot of what you care about.
Yeah, it's interesting, the Times, because so they wrote up a profile of probably a mutual friend of ours, Mike Masnick at Tech this weekend, and the actual profile was fine, but they wrote in the subhead something like, Somehow, comma, Mike is still optimistic about tech after 20 years of writing on it, as if it's impossible to be optimistic about tech. And I don't know why, but that was sort of it for me. Like I tweeted something out that I'm sure like all my friends that work at the New York Times hate me now, but it's just like, it's almost like their editorial board takes a look and is like, okay, how can we write something that will get the maximum amount of hate clicks? But for like actual trend stories on industry, not just, you know, something scandalous a celebrity does. And you expect it there, right? It's the internet. It's their job to get clicks. I understand that. But when they do it to actual like trend stories or serious reporting, I think they undermine their own credibility with smart people and people paying attention that aren't just interested in being like outrage baited by, you know, 100-year-old brands, right?
Yeah, I mean, the bias is obvious and inescapable. I almost don't even want to. It's like it's silly to even. I don't want to be upset about it anymore. Like I was upset about it for so long, so I don't think about it. I just, for me, it's just like, okay, I know that there's bias there, and I actually am grateful when they say things like the headline that you revealed before about Masnick, who also I don't like. No, I'm not friends with him.
It's okay.
But I like that they reveal their bias. I wish everybody would reveal my bias. And it's like, my job is not, I don't need them to be unbiased because nobody can be unbiased. If you're biased, just own your bias. And then what I can do is when I'm reading your piece, I can weigh that against what I know about you. And then I can weigh that against what I know about the subject. And when I don't know something about the subject, that's when you have to be really, really skeptical. And I fail at that all the time. That's this is the problem with, you know, this is probably the high level problem with media is it's like, it's really hard, even when you know how this stuff works, it's really, really, really hard not to be influenced by people who are trying to influence you.
Yeah, that's why I really I've always liked opinion pieces more from individual blogs than mainstream media, because over time that person does reveal themselves to you and you get a sense for who they are. We can move off of media in the sense of times and stuff. I want to talk about more media, but more interesting media. So obviously Barbie and Oppenheimer were big moments in time for the world and for the movie industry. I am excited that we got a little bit of cinema that wasn't another Avengers sequel and wasn't, you know, just another something, you know, resurrection of, you know, they're not going to make a Ferris Bueller's Day Off 2, but something like that, right? Where they just dig into the past for nostalgia. I wonder, does the success of, let's leave Barbie for a second, does the success of Oppenheimer wake up Hollywood for like big, bold, creative? I mean, do they see those numbers and realize, whoa, if we actually do something and greenlight something ambitious, we're going to get people to the theater, and we can't just, you know, have this sort of hyper capitalist late stage playbook of creativity where we just milk nostalgia because we can. Like, is that enough? Like, do you have any sense about that industry and that part of the media world?
So no one ever agrees with me when I talk about this, but I think that Marvel movies are ambitious. And I think that the Avengers was like incredibly ambitious. You're talking about a sprawling 10-year, 15-year epic that sums to like a 2-part, like 6-hour war to save reality. Like that's fucking awesome. That's very epic and very ambitious. And I think also a lot of the archetypes that are invoked in those movies are important. And the reason that these movies are so successful is because our culture is starved for those archetypes. And to see those very simple sort of good versus evil stories play out, Thanos is like, his entire, it's actually quite complex villain scenario where he's trying to do good by really, he's an environmentalist. He's trying to like wipe out half the population to conserve resources. And then you have people who are fighting to stop him because, you know, all people have a right to exist and freedom and value. These are like, they're good stories. They're important stories. I like them. I don't have a problem. I don't need to see tortured like literary fiction on screen. And with Oppenheimer, like, yes, it was very ambitious. I love Christopher Nolan. I think that Oppenheimer was like, for me, it was middle of the pack for his movies. I didn't need all the communist stuff in there, the sort of persecution of the communist stuff. I didn't care about the McCarthyism. I cared about the bomb, and I wanted to see the assembling of the team and the working to do this thing and ending the war. All of that was exciting to me, and I felt like I didn't really get as much of that. In terms of what the studio will do, the studio will not learn from this. I think that Oppenheimer and Barbie, it was like a perfect storm. It was the Barbenheimer confluence there that really attracted people at a time when people hadn't also been to the theaters in a while. It felt like a return. It was exciting. Let's dress up. Let's go. And people were hosting screenings. It's going to be very, very, very hard to replicate something like that. Movies are on a half-century long decline at this point. Like that trend is, I would love it to not continue because I love movies, but I don't see how that's going to stop. And I unfortunately don't feel good about the future of Nolan-esque filmmakers. I don't think the industry will learn from this. No.
Yep. From a Nolan perspective, my one sad part of it is that Nolan is so great at these psychological puzzle movies that you can keep rewatching and get something new out of it every time. Like if you rewatch Inception, you'll get something else, a wonderful piece of art. And with a biopic, you wouldn't watch a biopic more than once. Not really. You get the story. It's kind of done. There's no like extra mystery there unless you're really into it. But it's interesting because Mike likes all of the Avenger movies, and I think it's funny. All of the ad creative people, they're a little depressed, right? Sometimes they're a little doomer-esque, so they loved Oppenheimer, and then they also really liked Barbie because they're like, oh, this is fun, and this is sort of, rebirthing a lot of the maybe more grandiose forms of advertising. Like, there's an entire Barbie house in LA, right? So like for our industry, it was
really
funny.
Smart. It was good. The ads for Barbie were phenomenal.
The ambition on the marketing side of both, I think our industry was like, oh my God, we can do big, ambitious things again, regardless of what even happened in the movies. I think people were excited.
Yeah, I think they signed like 200 partnerships just like with other brands. Yeah, the cross-pollination that they were doing was very impressive.
Great. So we talked about Barbie and Oppenheimer. One thing that I think you'll find interesting and probably have a take on, Mike, is we've heard from a lot of podcast guests and just peers in the industry, especially on the creative side, that basically the culture of safety-ism that had been warned about by folk like Jonathan Haidt in universities has crept into corporate America. And so what this means for someone like an ad creative is even more than necessarily being like politically leaning one way or another, that could be it too. But the sort of committees that creates means that 5 people have to input to an idea. And so you're a writer. If you had 5 editors, like a Pirate Wires post would be pretty bad. And so what you get with a lot of, I'm not sure if you've noticed this with ad creative, but the really top people in advertising are frustrated now because the ad creative coming out of these teams where safety-ism is prioritized and everyone gets a voice ultimately leads to mediocre creative. I don't know if you can name a single ad that was in the last Super Bowl, but like the last ad that I can name is the Coinbase ad, just because they did something different. They made a bet that was someone's idea and they got to run with it. And it wasn't, a group in the room that threw 5 celebrities and, $10 million at the piece of creative. So with that, is that something that you think has peaked? Is that something we're going to continue to see? I know it's happened at tech and in big tech companies too. I'm sure you've heard about this, but what's your take on how we sort of proceed, at least with like the creative output of companies?
Well, I think I agree with the premise, I think, which is like the more people who work on something creative, the worse it becomes. And that is because, like all things probably in life, you need someone to lead. You need someone to be telling in the context of ads or creative marketing. So separate from running Pirate Wires, I run brand at Founders Fund. And so that's a creative marketing position. And it's like you're telling a story. And the reason that works, I think brand works, is because you have one person telling a story. And that requires, I think, trust on the part of the people you're working with. And in the early days of Founders Fund, it was easy to come by because nobody at Founders Fund cared about brand. And I just happened to love it. And so they were like, sure, go off and do your thing. And so I think just by sort of almost by accident, the things that I did worked really well. And then I had a lot of trust, and the more important brand became, obviously, it was like, oh, these things have a huge impact. People are responding to the things that we talk about and things that we do. And even what things that I was saying online mattered. Now there's like more of a premium internally on our brand, and I just happen to have built it, because no one else was doing it. And so my lesson there, the lesson that I learned is just exactly what you're saying, is that you want one person in charge. The few moments when more people have tried to interject themselves, they've gotten randomly excited about something, and we had like something sort of like I would never say it was as bad as a committee. There was no Safety-ism at Founders Fund, but anytime it's like multiple people involved trying to make something happen, it loses its identity. And in the age that I think probably this has always been the case, but certainly today on the internet, things do not live without an identity. That is what people are attracted to. That class of people we were talking about before, the sort of the information class, let's call them, those people are not talking about brands. They're talking about people at the brands. Like, in the brands that try to act like people don't really work. Like, you need to be, there needs to just be like an authentic identity behind everything that you do. And bureaucratic organizations or organizational structures are the death of that. And that's what wokeness is. Like, that's what the Safety-ism stuff is. At the end of the day, it's just another bureaucratic layer. It's one more bureaucrat. It's like a jobs program for losers. And that is the case for all bureaucratic positions. And this is just one more layer for those people. And it's like, I think probably any organization that gets rid of those layers will be, I know that any organization that gets rid of those layers will be much better for it.
I think that, as you described it, it dawned on me, it's not entirely a new phenomenon. No. We call it woke now, but in the past, it was safer for you to ship something with, if you were at a big company, ship something with like 5 people's names on it. That way, if it fails, well, they're probably not going to fire all 5 of you, right? And so this is, whatever's happening now is just another modern way for people to hide from things. And I actually think this stems from an op-ed that we ran today where, Chris was basically pointing out it's a leadership crisis, right? We get these people in like the CMO role, and their whole goal is to not do anything that rocks the boat. And I actually think that's most dangerous of all. When you see like the Bud Light situation, they thought they were doing something safe. They thought they were doing something crowd consensus. And it was probably surprising to the people who worked on that there was such pushback. And I think they so badly misread the room because they're, so far in this, bubble that they think that, I think they took like a crazy risk without realizing it. I don't even think
they definitely took a risk. I think that had more to do with their not even knowing, let alone respecting their core constituency. But yes, I agree that this stuff has existed actually forever, and that it is just people do hide behind other people. And when you're a huge company, I think it's easier to do that because your brand doesn't take that much to just maintain stasis and like to keep things going. But you can't do that at all. There's no room for that when you're just starting. You have to have a perspective or no one is going to care.
One thing that I've seen with the sort of, tech has kind of been in a little bit of a bear market from a hiring perspective for a while as teams run leaner, due to the market and AI and whatnot. And some of my favorite people who are on the job market right now that I talk to that I would call like, a little bit outspoken, weird iconoclast. I feel like from hearing their stories about interviews with HR that they're just like going to have to start their own thing at this point because some of them are so iconoclast now, they're never going to conform to like a large company. But I think that's kind of sad because it didn't always used to be that way in tech. Like I was hired at Google because like I didn't even apply there. The VP had read my blog for a number of years, sent a note to me, and I didn't even want to go. You know, I was a consultant. I like being a consultant and being like the Michael Weston hired gun thing. And they like persuaded me to go in-house at Google, and they're like, we're not going to bother you and all this stuff. But I feel like that wouldn't even happen now.
Well, no, because tech 15 years ago or 10 years ago was still like an underdog, and it was not really. It felt weird to even refer to tech as like corporate America. It didn't feel like it was. It felt like it's a totally separate business ecosystem. And now it just obviously is corporate America. And that's just because it won. Everything is tech now. Everything is technology to some extent. If a company is not a technology company, it's like operating on top of the product that is built in Silicon Valley or somewhere near, like, like a 20-mile radius of Silicon Valley. That just means that the industry has matured, and in a mature giant industry, this bureaucratic creep happens. People stop taking risks because you've just naturally hired more risk-averse people. Google is now run by people not who found companies, but by people who look for mature, successful companies to work at. And that's just a different profile of person. So it makes complete sense that tech is operating like, your average mature company, because they are mature companies now. I think you still find a lot of this in any new company. Like if you just separate the giants in tech from startups in tech, even Series A or B or something, like I think you find more room for risk, more tolerance for risk, and so more ambitious creative people. I wonder if your friends are looking for where they're looking for roles. If they're looking for roles at Google or something, then they're not as iconoclastic perhaps as you think they are, because that's just not a role that an iconoclastic person would take.
AI. Everyone wants to work in AI right now.
Well, AI is a separate situation, because what is AI? It's Microsoft and Google. So those are mature companies. Like you're not going to some scrappy AI startup. You're going to two of the most dominant tech companies in history looking for a job. And I'm guaranteeing you, they're not looking for some $50,000 a year job with lots of equity or something. It's like they want like $500,000 at least. And that's like, I don't know what else you would expect other than to be met with opposition to crazy new ideas at a company like that. I guess
the good news for a venture fund, though, is if the large companies will stop hiring people who make bets at some point, since the internet is operating at a much more hyper capitalist level, and there can be that churn pretty easily. Like users can try something else pretty fast. So
they can, but I don't know that I see that. I'm surprised that if you look 10 years ago, the most popular companies in tech are still basically the most popular companies in tech today. There hasn't really been a lot of churn or transformation. They've all just grown a lot bigger because way more people are online, and they also have just inhabited more parts of our lives in the world. But there aren't really many new dominant companies. Sort of the newest dominant company is probably Uber, Airbnb, like Stripe, which is the back end of stuff. It's like not even, but we're all still on Google. We're all on Gmail. We're all still, our social media companies are either Facebook owned and operated, or what Twitter is very small by comparison, but also really old in the internet years. It's like ancient. And I don't know I think that we all thought that tech, certainly when I started in tech 12 years ago or so, and I was kind of aware of it earlier than that because I became friends with my now boss, Peter, 15 years ago. And so that's when it first got on my radar. It seemed like it would be constantly rebirthing. It would be like companies would be burning and new companies would be rising. And that's just what tech was. And because that's what tech had been for so many years. But the internet is maturing, and the giants are still the giants. They're just bigger than they used to be, a lot bigger than they used to be. And I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic about it because I think the newness is important. I think it's a part of tech. I wrote a whole piece on this for pirate wire. It's called the Fifth Estate. I think that the nature of technology is to burn away the old and like rebirth new things. It's like this weird failsafe on power. But these companies, we haven't seen a check on Google in a while, and I would actually really love to see one, to be honest.
I think the concerning part for me as a marketer is when you see things like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter throttle our organic link sharing and basically make us pay to play to be able to even share things. Chris actually measures this in streams, and he noticed a significant decline in the surfacing of posts that have links, right? So to your point, Mike, if the sort of standard railroad theory becomes true and we sort of laid the tracks of, the internet megacorps, and there is no check on them, that's like potentially a scary thing for users. I'm more optimistic. I think,
I saw you tweeted about the links thing the other day, and it's just obviously, or was it yesterday? Maybe it was just definitely true. It's always been bad, and now it's a lot worse, and that sucks for us. It's great for them. It sucks for us. Like, I don't want to be trapped in a walled garden. I want the good internet shit that we used to have. That was awesome. Even just like a few years ago was awesome on Twitter, because Twitter. The other thing about Twitter, people forget, like, Twitter was one of the better ones when it came to this stuff. It was easier to share information, and Elon's he's not like doing this radically new thing. He's actually just doing what all the other companies were already doing. And that's sad for me, someone who loved what Twitter was. And what Twitter was really comes down to Jack Dorsey, who really gets a bad rap because he is a romantic, capital R romantic, when it comes to this kind of stuff. He's a true believer of the old school internet and like of the freedom of information and letting people link and letting people, share information unencumbered. And he didn't want to sell to Zuckerberg. Like, that was I think he made a lot of mistakes in hiring, and then he checked out and sort of allowed people to rise up against him and do some pretty nefarious things. But even still, like, those nefarious things done at Twitter were not as bad as what we saw at Facebook, for example.
Facebook's awful. Facebook had small little psyops that they would do where you would click a link to leave Facebook and there'd be a warning basically saying the rest of the internet that's not Facebook is a dangerous place. And they were putting this on people who were like very new to the internet still, and like conditioning them not to leave Facebook's safe space. And they are just, it's awful, because we're the ones who built Facebook in college. Like, I literally helped build their site and share Facebook with all my friends at the University of Florida. I was like one of the first people there on the site. And it's just like Twitter as well. Like, Twitter, we built as bloggers. Mike, you're so great because you remind me of the previous first wave gen of bloggers. You have the same fire and passion, and you give a fuck, and it's so refreshing and awesome to see. But like, we helped build Twitter by making it like the water cooler of the blogosphere. I don't buy that like big reporters made Twitter happen. I think like bloggers did. And so it's like sad that now that they've become the empire and we help build it, the sort of drawbridge gets rolled up, right? And now they're being, they're throttling things like Substack links because they think it's a competitor. Someone had a great tweet the other day. They basically said, Twitter is the tavern, Substack is the temple. And they're absolutely spot the fuck on. Everyone wants to have micro content and the sort of snap content in Twitter, and people want the real meal, the soul nourishing, thoughtful, intellectual stuff in a platform where there's not people shouting about, whatever political nonsense, and they can have a calmer experience. So it's sad we're at this state of affairs. I'm still bullish Substack just because I remain perma-bullish email. No matter what any of these social platforms do, I read my email every day, and it's, a nice clean space that I get to define. So, the social networks have power insofar as we give them power, but we can like choose to not give a certain site power. And
we can't choose is the thing. It's all the platforms. This is why you can't build a new Twitter. And why building a new social media company is so hard is because there's no map to doing that, because it is all just group psychology. Is like people just collectively decide where to be. And when they do, that's that. Like you're not gonna, no matter how influential you are, you're not gonna pull people over to some new platform people want to be where everybody is. And this is the same thing. It works in a lot of weird other contexts. Like think about Howard Stern. Like he didn't create, like Sirius didn't, I never got Sirius. I never wanted Sirius. I used the regular radio and then I went to Spotify and now I listen to podcasts on like YouTube and shit. Like I didn't follow him. Like I just didn't do that, and I'm not going to do that. And that's because like I want to be in the place where things are happening. Now, if everybody was there, maybe I would. But I don't know. That never really happened, did it? So it's like
I do literally open Spotify to watch Joe Rogan. By the way,
I do too.
Like only Joe Rogan.
I already have. Didn't you have Spotify before he joined?
I have beef with Spotify.
Oh yeah, like
they've taken.
I got it day one. It came to the U.S.
They've taken down my 100% original music. They've DMCA'd me, so dead to me.
I just don't. But that's just like that's a separate conversation. But
yeah.
Like opening up Spotify to listen to Rogan, you were already on Spotify. I was already on. Who was not on Spotify? That Spotify had already won. So like that was very different than. Are you going to pay money to go to JoeRogan.com and subscribe to this thing? And I think
no, probably not. You're right. You're right.
A lot of people would. I think that's like the age that we're living in, like where a really influential person can actually build something. I mean, you look at what Ben Shapiro did with the Daily Wire, which is now much bigger than him, but it started as like his thing, right? And like he built something out around him. There were plenty of people that followed him there, and that's, you know, really powerful. But that's very, very hard to do. And social media certainly, and platforms like Twitter certainly, it's just not going to happen. Everyone wants to be where everyone is, and it just always has been like that. It will always be like that. No one knows how to recreate that. No matter what anyone tells you about some secret sauce, they have to do it. It's all bullshit. Like it's just strange mass human psychology, and it's mysterious, and it goes where it goes.
Nikita knows how, but he won't tell anyone.
Do we want to talk about, well, you're the billionaire former mayor of San Francisco. I mean, I think we should just kind of go to a fun topic because too much doomerism. But anyway, what are some of the most intense notes that you've gotten? Because I mean, obviously, very opinionated. And then if they go click in through your bio, they'll see that, you know, you were the former mayor of San Francisco. How much hate do you get given the state of San Francisco right now?
I get a lot less than you would think, and I don't know why that is. The hate comes online. Hate comes in waves. Usually, it's like something goes viral, and then you get a lot of it all at once. It's very concentrated doses of extreme vitriol, and I haven't gotten it like in years. Like people make nasty comments all the time, but it's far less of that than I get positive stuff. And I have people in my mentions now they take care of the haters for me. I don't even respond. Like I think it's just like something happens at a certain level on Twitter is my primary platform. And it's like something happens at a certain level of follower on Twitter where people stop seeing you as a person. And so I think they hate you less. It's like, you're like a publisher at a certain point, and people will jump in your comments, not even to talk to you, but to talk to other people in your comments. And you're just the topic in a weird way. It feels, I don't know, like it for example, like I stopped being able to make friends on Twitter up until maybe like 20,000 followers. It was this really cool thing. Like everyone that I followed, I had a lot in common with, and we would meet online. And then if I met them in the real world, it's like we were instantly friends because we had already sort of proofed we'd vetted each other based on our thoughts. That's what Twitter is. It's just like your real-time thoughts about things. And so of course it made sense. It's like, wow, we're all friends here. But as I got bigger, it's like that stopped happening. Like when I would meet people, it wouldn't be the same. And I never really quite knew why or how. And it's because they just didn't, I don't think they really saw me as a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a very weird, strange thing where people literally just look at the number and they treat you as like either a person or a publisher. And right now I'm a publisher, so I get less of that. That means less hate. And when the hate does come, it doesn't matter as much as it used to me. So yeah, I get a lot, and I just kind of roll my. Sometimes I'll comment just because I see an easy opportunity to make another point that I want to make. Like if someone says something really stupid and it's a layup and it seems fun to like clap back, I will. But
You grew up in the cohort where you basically were part of the first generation onboarded to the internet. Like you didn't have a cell phone, your whole childhood or anything like that.
No,
yeah.
It was high school. Yeah.
So you're part of the cohort. You were immunized from the hate online. Whereas I feel like the really young cohort, like the Zoomers, grew up with cell phones. So it was always very serious to them. And somehow the baby boomers, like everything gets under their skin. So they sort of get triggered. And because you were sort of, you watched the evolution happen and, you were using the internet during the Wild West days, you realize like, not to like let it like get under your skin too much.
I wouldn't do that. Like, so the few times that I've actually been like brutally gone after have been, it's when the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, they must have massive group chats or something because they swarm around you. And so you'll go from nothing to, I wrote a piece, there's a piece, Chris, behind, there's a picture behind you that There Will Be Blood picture. So that picture is the picture that I used for a piece of mine on Pirate Wires called Extract or Die, which is like the piece that made Pirate Wires. Like that I went from like writing and being whatever to like everyone in tech read that piece. And that was about local politics in San Francisco. And I kind of, I broke down what was broken. And I sort of explained tech's role in that or lack thereof. And the socialists got a hold of it. It was very popular in tech. And then the socialists got a hold of it a couple days later. And like the quote tweets and the comments, we're talking like thousands of people who are just furious and sending you guillotine emojis and like asking what your address is and shit like that. And it happened twice. The next one was Christmas Eve, 2021, I think. And that was the last time it ever happened to me. Those two were really crazy. And that level of hatred, when people are really going in, and they find pictures of you online and they look for your family and stuff. It's like really intense. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it doesn't get under my skin. Like when the mob really swarms, it's really hard for it not to get under your skin. There's no immunity. There's no, I think, preparing yourself for that until it happens. And then when it does, no one knows how to relate to you unless it's happened to them. Like everyone wants to help you, but it's like, unless you've been piled on like that, it's like, unless you've had thousands of people tell you that they wish you would just die. That's like, it's hard, even though it sounds stupid. It's like, of course they don't know you, who cares? But like, it is hard to manage. But yeah, to a certain extent, the sort of run of the mill comments don't bother me at all. I think they're funny or even fun.
The Swifties attacked me similarly. I literally was watching the comments go from time zone to time zone when I woke up. They must have like a shared chat.
And Andreessen talks about a version of this when the nation of India like descended on him. This was like years ago. This predated because Mark left Twitter for a while and then he reemerged. He talks about a similar time zone thing where like he watched them sort of wake up and be mad.
Yes, the Swifties systemically attack anyone who doesn't, I guess, kiss the ring or is pro Beyonce or something like that. I don't know what's going on there. It's got to be. I'm still convinced that one's a music industry psyop. There can't be, or maybe there are really that many like angry teenagers that are policing the internet for Swift comments.
Look at old videos of Elvis concerts or Beatles sort of walking through a crowd and like what happens. People lose their minds with musical celebrities. Like it's something primal and I think religious. You see it in like church experiences where people are
fainting,
are speaking tongues and fainting and things like that. Like they're tapping into musicians like Taylor Swift today and before them, certainly like the Beatles and Michael Jackson.
Jackson, definitely.
They tap into something just primal is the only way I can describe it. And I believe it. I believe that those Swifties went after you for real. And I believe they really existed somewhere. I believe there are really people. It's like some guy at a gas station It's like some like 15-year-old girl in school. It's like they're all actually online and they're all really, really mad at you for going after Taylor.
As a white male, I'm public enemy one for having opinions on music. That's illegal now. That's supposed to be.
Dude, I said horn sections don't belong in bands on Twitter yesterday, and I'm dealing with everybody just shredding me, calling me a racist. Like, it's ridiculous.
The best is when people don't agree with me and call me a Nazi. I'm like, I'm Jewish. Like, what? I just don't understand. Like, okay, like it's
no.
insanity.
That ship has sailed a long time ago. The Jew card doesn't get you out of anything. Neither does the gay card. Nope. Those cards are worthless these days.
We actually have secret global control of the earth anyway. So.
Well, if you really did, you wouldn't be experiencing this problem right now. Tell your secret cabal of Jew people to handle this, please. I'm tired of the mob.
Speaking of global international stuff, briefly, I saw that Canada is upset that Facebook didn't give in to their demands to pay them for links, which is really just extortion. It's like, do they not understand how the internet works? What do they think they're going to get out of this? And I guess we can talk about GDPR and the EMEA after, but let's just talk about Canada real quick, because this is weird.
I think the Canada stuff's, so for a little context for your audience, so this has happened before. I think there was an attempt in California. I think there was an attempt in Spain. I forget which company dealt with it. It might have been Google previously. There's this idea among a certain kind of person that news is news specifically from the sort of like the correct sources. So the New York Times, the BBC, things like this, NPR, the most sacred. This is a public good. It is important. And the social media giants and the media giant, Google, the search giants, have basically captured all of the ad revenue that used to sustain these companies. And so the idea is like, well, listen, if these companies want to make money off of this information, they should have to pay them. So they're like, from now on, for every link that you post from the New York Times or whatever on Facebook, the New York Times should get like a fraction of a penny or something. And the response from Facebook is like, actually, we don't really need this shit on this platform. It just makes people miserable anyway. We'll just fucking remove it. So fine. If you're going to make us pay for it, we won't buy it. We're not buying what you're selling. And then it's like, well, the joke's on you because that's how you get traffic. And with the New York Times, the New York Times, they're dominant. So it's not really going to affect them. What the random press, like the local Canadian Times of like Ottawa or whatever, is getting from Facebook is tremendously valuable. And what Facebook is getting from the Ottawa, whatever the fuck, is not very valuable at all. And so it's just like, why on earth would we pay for that? And I'm glad that they're not, because it sets an insane precedent that is not fair. Like, first, separately from not being fair to the companies, it's not fair to us. I post every day. Why is the Ottawa press getting a fraction of a penny and not me? Although now I do on Twitter because Elon's in charge. But the average person does not, and that's not fair. Like, why is some information treated as sacred and other information not? Who makes those decisions? The government? Well, that seems really bad, at least from an American perspective. I don't want the government deciding that. And that's what was happening in Canada. But I mean, it's typical. It makes sense that it's happening in Canada. Canada is like a Bizarro World version of America, where there is no counterbalance to the craziest left-wing shit that exists. I mean, look at it today. It's like legalized suicide and the LGBTQI number, whatever, plus AX. It's like, and Trudeau just casually saying that shit.
Oh, he's really good at that, by the way.
Perfectly.
Like, it rolls off his tongue.
Because it matters, like Two-Spirit, whatever. Like, he's doing land recognitions of like the tribal whatever who owned whatever fraction. Like, they're like they are. It is like the joke, the meme. This is the future liberals want. It's literally the future liberals want. It exists in Canada. It's horrifying. You need balance. Like, America is a land of balance, thank God. Other people will disagree with that, but I think it's much more balanced than Canada.
Is this the same Wokistan that Taleb was talking about? Or I guess we could repackage that and apply it to Canada in 2023.
Well, I don't think the thing about wokeness in America is that we're allowed to talk about it here. In Canada, the whole reason Jordan Peterson is a celebrity is because he was standing in opposition to a law that was going to force him to use someone's chosen pronouns, which is in America, that is a clear violation of free speech.
Yeah, it's compelled speech.
In this country, you're allowed to be an asshole. And that is like a sacred right that like we cannot lose. And it is not a right that is universal. I think most countries do not have it. I actually don't think another country does have. I know that no other country has a robust a tradition of free speech as America does, but I think no other country has even this right to like just really to basically just make somebody mad. I mean, in France, it's the same. In France, you can't even criticize people's faith. You had Brigitte Bardot famously getting in trouble for criticizing Islam and things like this. Like, that's just crazy. Can you imagine in America not being able to criticize a religion? That's like a national pastime here. It's just like an unthinkable hellscape information ecosystem abroad.
You know, Noah Opinion was saying the other day that we've passed or at least reached peak woke, and that people are kind of over it. You know, people are ready for just a more balanced world.
I wrote about this months ago.
Do you think that's true? Because I think that could be true, but at the same time, it does seem like there's a lot of corporate America that's still a little bit ideologically captured, right?
Yeah. So I think it's like, so I wrote this piece called Vibes in the Machine. This was 2 or 3, maybe it was like 3 months ago or something. And this is roughly my sense too. It's like, certainly in tech, the vibe is completely shifted. And it's open season on any bad idea from the sort of like more authoritarian left. You can criticize anything. I went after gender quotas the other day. The idea that it's okay to hire based on sex and I didn't say race, but I believe that as well. I think it's wrong to have quotas for this, or to have hiring committees being like, how do we find more Black people? It's like, how do you find more qualified people? And then if they're Black, they should be hired. It's like, and how is it not racist to say anything else, not only against white people, but against Black people? The assumption that they can't be hired, they don't have merit. Anyway, other conversation. But that is an opinion you could not have shared freely without being expected to be dogpiled a couple of years ago. I think the vibe probably shifted a little bit further back than we even realized. It just took us a minute to kind of look around and be like, oh wow, like I've been able to say stuff for a while now, in a way that you like think back to 2020 really was. I think 2020 was probably the peak. That summer of 2020 was I think really as bad as it got. And then it was a decline. Like, it was bad still after that, but it was getting better and better gradually, even before Elon took over Twitter. But obviously when he did, suddenly things overnight changed in terms of things you were allowed to say online. So I think broadly in tech and then beyond it, yeah, there has been a culture shift. I think that the authoritarian leftism is really, really not popular right now. Nobody wants to be told they're a racist for not being a racist, and nobody wants to talk. Quotas are not popular at colleges. Like, this was a Supreme Court case that I think the left really wanted to make a big deal, and they really, really hoped that there'd be like widespread protests over this. But no one can defend that. No one can defend the idea of a college administrator looking at candidates and judging whether or not they go to the school based on the color of their skin. It's like clearly racist, and that's just like, that stuff's over. However, like you said, it's over after having. I have a lot of friends who believe it's over because they won. It's over because they now control, you know, every bureaucracy in the country is now, you know, quote unquote woke. I think there's some truth to that, certainly in the public sector. I don't think that's true in tech anymore. I think that these people, any CEO that exists to be doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example, like, their job is at risk. If they've not already been removed from the premises, their job is at risk. That style of thinking is not really permitted anymore. You have a lot of really high profile moments in tech over the last few years, not just recently, but like at Coinbase, famously, it's like, we're not talking about politics at work anymore. We're only talking about things that are related to our actual job, which sounds obvious, but is quite revolutionary in tech, because tech has been captured for years by a small minority of highly left-wing and highly online employees who just were relentlessly political and wanted to bring national politics into your day-to-day reality. Similar policy was passed then a year later or so at Facebook, and no one even mentioned it because there had been a major cultural shift. So I agree with, before Noah, it was obviously, I think Paul Graham mentioned something, and like a handful of people in tech were mentioning it. I wrote that piece a few months ago. Like, I think that's true. I think that there's been a major cultural shift. I think things are better now. And I think the goal now is to rebuild systems in such a way as like that kind of stuff is not possible anymore. I don't know that there's a way to successfully do that there's a way to successfully defend ourselves against this kind of insanity, because it comes from nowhere and it sweeps over people like a faith. My sense is things are just going to be better for a while. And then maybe like a decade from now, they're going to get really worse. They're going to get a lot worse out of sort of nowhere, just like they did this last time around.
It's kind of like an oscillating sine wave situation.
Well, this stuff happened it was the late 80s and the early 90s. None of us remember it because we're all too young for that. But like the Gen X, like older Gen X especially, like people today in their 50s, they were in college when this shit was happening for the first time. And I went to college in 2003 to 2007, and that didn't exist. It was completely not a part of my life. So it was like very clearly a wave that sort of the trend vanished, and then when it reemerged, it was more dominant than ever before. And I think that probably will happen again.
Yeah, a lot of people say that this is part of the quote unquote fourth turning. If you were to ask like one of the really Bitcoin maximalist types and saying this is, the final stage of an empire, which I don't believe, but there's also that attitude that, things are just going to get progressively worse. And I think, the sort of perma bears had their moment, and I agree that we've sort of passed it. And however much longer a better scenario can go, I think things feel like they're balancing.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're better. I think that things are definitely a little bit better. I think our schools are still insane. I think the people who run our schools, the teachers, are still pretty crazy.
Unions don't deliver value anymore to their constituents.
What doesn't deliver value?
Unions don't deliver value to their constituents, and they don't have the bargaining power anymore. And
well, yeah, because we've deindustrialized. So all of the relevant unions don't have power because of that. And what's replaced some of these like white collar unions or silly unions like the Starbucks union. And it's like they all want bullshit because they don't have real problems. But that's a whole other, I think the deindustrialization stuff is a real problem. Like you have these leftists who want to talk about unions and how much they care about the working class. And it's like, well, how do you feel about globalism? Because that fucked the working class. And it seems like you love that stuff. So
yeah, I think we should try to move away from an Atlas Shrugged type world. But, I definitely appreciate how you call out the insanity in your work, Mike, in Pirate Wires. But like, what you cover a lot of surface area. And I think, I for our audience, obviously we should use this as an opportunity to get them a little bit more acquainted with your work. What's the long-term vision for Pirate Wires? What specific topics do you think you'll be covering, or is it just going to be guns blazing against all insanity in the real world?
So I think I'm really trying to get away from just reacting, which is fun for me, but I want to build something bigger than myself. I want what I'm doing now is we're building out verticals where people can sort of have a more curated Pirate Wires experience. So there's Pirate Wires main, which is me. It's my takes on technology, politics, and culture. That sort of strange intersection of the three, especially, is where I like have the most fun, and I think I have the most insight. But all of those different verticals, all of those three are verticals themselves. And so we're launching new things. So we have the White Pill is more of a science technology focus, sort of optimistic, fun vertical that you can subscribe to. Mm-hmm. We're about to launch a tech business vertical where I can just do tech news and sort of dominate there. We're going to hire writers for that. And we'll continue to sort of branch out with these verticals. There'll be newsletter forward. So, you get a weekly letter at least from this place, but then also like new content specific to that vertical, all of which will be published at piratewires.com. And I think of our job as just making sense sort of translating the chaos of the internet, because I think social internet, especially as Adam was talking earlier, is made things just totally impossible to understand what's going on. It's like we're living in, I refer to it all the time, it's like the clown world is like a sort of a vertical of itself at Pirate Wires. It's like I love to report from the dispatches from the clown world. And it's like you're just logging on to the internet. You have no idea what's going on. You have no idea where to even start. And it's like, well, here's Pirate Wires to help you make sense of that, because that's what I'm doing all day, is just trying to understand what the fuck is going on. And then when I figure it out, I'm like, here's my report. Like here's what I think is going on. I think that's the future of media, is curation, because there's just too much of it. No one ever saw a world coming where, I think the idea in 20 years ago was like, oh man, information is going to be free. We're going to have access to everything. That's just a net positive. And it's like, that is true. We do have access to everything now, and that is very good. But what we didn't sort of understand somehow, what no one really predicted, was we would also all be creating information. And that would mean that we had more information than ever before by like several orders of magnitude. And that would make it impossible to understand, to discern, let's say, signal from the noise. And so people who do that, that's what I think the future of media is that's what you're providing, is a sense of just what's going on. And it's really hard to do that with so much noise, but I think it's the only way forward for a media company.
One more question, follow up. Do you call yourself a journalist in 2023?
Some people do call me a journalist, and I think it's funny and fine. I don't know what a journalist is really. Like, I guess a journalist, if you just like the definition of a journalist, I probably do fit that. I think of myself as a writer, and I think of all journalists as writers. I don't subscribe to some of the ethical tenets of the modern journalist, but journalists, the word journalist predates the modern journalist. And by the ethical tenets, I mean like the neutrality thing, I think, is really just impossible. It's impossible for a human to be neutral. So when you say that you're lying, and that's a form of manipulation that I just really don't like. And so I think it's like, I mean, your bias is so important. Your bias is how you decide what even is news. Like, how do I decide what's important? The only way to do that is with a bias. So everybody's biased. Bias isn't bad. What's bad is concealing your bias. What's bad is lying about your bias. What's bad is manipulating people because of your bias. Like, but you got to own your bias. And so I think that if you could just get rid of that part of it, then yeah, I think I probably am a journalist. But I'm also, I mean, I'm the editor in chief. I'm running the thing. I don't want to just be a guy with a microphone. I want to raise up younger writers who are talented, who are values, whose values are oriented in a similar way as mine, and who want to share the truth as they see it as well, and help people understand what's going on. And I want to build a whole big sort of empire based on that.
Right on.
That's so awesome to see, Mike. I remember at one point during the pandemic, I was reading one of your stories, and I think I sent you a message saying, you need to quit all the VC stuff and just do this. Like, I read your story. I'm like, this is the best thing I read all month. And, you know, I read a lot of media, and I'm like, why is Mike not just doing this full time? So it's like, it's so awesome to see you get to this point. Like, it's one of the bright spots for me here.
That, whoever is doing your production on the podcast, man, we need to steal them from
Matt Walensky. He's so good.
Like the fuzzy TV graphic in between the shots.
Yeah, Matt's the man. And that's one of the things I love about being able to build a business, is like I get to bring in these great talented people who genuinely like he as a hire has been such a lift for me. I bring him in. He does, all I have to do is talk. I have to prepare the questions and talk. And that is, it's like a gift that he gets it. Like he has his own aesthetic, but like he takes, you know, some direction from me, but most of that is his. Like he comes up, he finds those clips, he does all the editing. He really loves it. He's got a sense. He's a fan of the show. He was a fan of Pirate Wires before I met him through another podcast actually. And we became friends, and like, he's just, yeah, he's great. Hires like that are so important. And they just, like, when you make a good hire, it just dramatically alters what you're capable of.
Well, yeah, we're doing a podcast brought on Adam, and look at us now.
It's fun to work with Chris. It's good to work with, as I say, proper villains again, you know, be at a startup with people who get it, you know, get tech, get marketing, get the internet. There's a surprising amount of marketers in our field who like still are not
very tech savvy. Surprisingly, I'm shocked that this exists in 2023, the year of our Lord. Well, this has been awesome, Mike. Hopefully for our listeners, this is like a great like kind of buffet preview of Mike's thoughts. He gets into these topics and a lot more on his podcast and his Substack. Mike, just to end us, where should people find you on YouTube, on Substack, on Twitter?
For sure. We're Pirate Wires everywhere. So piratewires.com, Pirate Wires on YouTube, Pirate Wires on Twitter, or you can follow me on Twitter. Mike Solana, MIC, like the microphone, Solana, SOLANA at Twitter.
Awesome. Well, we love the consistent branding, so people can find you everywhere. Thank you so much again, Mike, for joining us. And for everyone who's watching this, please comment, like, subscribe. I am doing the YouTube thing today. Sorry, audio only listeners. You guys can, come find us on YouTube, but we will see you next week for another episode. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me, guys.